Senate File 2314 Subcommittee to order. This is a pretty large bill. I'm going to kind of go through and briefly describe each division. Division 1, ratification of major rules. This bill defines a major rule as one that does the following: requires annual expenditures of at least $200,000 or combined expenditures of at least $1 million within 5 years. Has significant adverse effects on competition, employment, investment, productivity, or innovation. Amends the state implementation plan under Section 110 of the Federal Clean Air Act. Division 2, ratification of proposed amendment to state implementation plan, Federal Clean Air Act. This bill requires that any proposal to amend the Iowa's implementation plan under the Federal Clean Air Act be ratified by General Assembly. Division 3 is the executive branch board in terms of office, currently members of the Iowa Finance Board, Authority Board, Ag Development, Board of Examiners, IPERS, State Board of Education, and Board of Regents. Serve 6-year terms. This bill specifies that the appointees of these boards honored after July 1st, 2026 will serve staggered terms of 4 years. This is better known as the REINS Act, to rein in regulation, burdens, and rules throughout the state. Any opening comments, Senator?
No, I'm just happy to hear from the board here.
Senator Busela.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear from the conversation. I serve on the Administrative Rules Review Committee today and have since I was elected to the House in 2021 and the Senate in 2022, and had the honor of serving as a non-voting member of the Administrative Rules Review Committee as legal counsel to Governor Branstad and Lieutenant Governor Reynolds. I remember, been around long enough now to remember a little over a decade ago when Governor Branstad signed into law some updates to the Administrative Rules Review process, including ceding more power to the legislative branch on review of those rules and the process of how those would be reviewed and actions the legislature could take. And so it's always good for us to ensure that the rules process remains accountable to the people, to the citizens of Iowa who are impacted by rules, to the businesses who have to follow those rules, and you know, to the state as a whole who has to live by them. And so excited to hear the conversation today on an idea that I think is focused on accountability to Iowans. So appreciate everyone being here.
All right, let's. If you are online and you wish to speak on this particular bill, please raise your virtual hand. We will get to you at the end, but I do warn people up front to get your hand up so that way you have time to do that. Let's start off with Tyler and your interpretation.
Tyler Egger, Americans for Prosperity. Thank you, Senators, for bringing this bill forward and hosting this discussion this morning. We believe it's important for Iowans to have a voice in the rules that are shaping their lives. This bill seeks to strengthen that voice by creating that accountability and giving more oversight and transparency through the rules process. And we think that's important because while taxes are a visible cost of government, regulations often serve as a hidden cost. They show up in fewer jobs, higher costs, and operators of businesses contemplating whether or not they should continue operating their business. So this bill seeks to provide more transparency, and with legislators having that oversight and being a greater part of the process for those major costly rules, we believe this is an important conversation, and hope you're moving forward. Thank you.
And I do believe there, I know that IPERS is in there. My friend Megan, it's different to be on the other side. There is an amendment we're already looking at that helps solve that IPERS got. There's some of their rules they need to be more flexibility because of your deal. But I'm sure you'll talk about it. But could you talk about it now? Because I know that there's an amendment, or we're waiting on some amendment language to.
Yeah, Megan
solve all that.
Shaleski with IPERS. We are undecided on the bill. I just wanted to point out that our contribution rates are recalculated every year based on an actuarial study. So that looks at investment returns. It looks at the funded ratio. It looks at the the experience of the fund. And so allowing those to be republished every year in administrative rules keeps them responsive to what's going on so that we don't fall behind on contributions. So they would fall under the definition of a major rule in the bill.
Okay. All right, let's start back over here and then come around the room. So, Mr. Conlon, let's start with you, that way we get back on the organization.
Happy to. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Andy Conlon, I'm here on behalf of several clients, including Iowans for Tax Relief. We are registered in support of this bill, particularly Divisions 1 and 2. We think that this bill represents an important opportunity to give legislators a louder voice in rules that have the force of law. So we are very supportive of it. I do want to speak specifically to Division 2. We have seen states without legislative oversight submit waivers to the federal government, have seen those waivers approved, and seen major costs shared onto business. My clients believe that there should be an opportunity for the legislature to have a voice in that process as well. I do want to say I think there is probably value, and I have an amendment that I'm happy to share, although I haven't yet, considering the tight timeline this morning, to exempt a couple of waivers that are done on a fairly regular process that we believe the executive branch needs a little more flexibility with. We also think something that was missing in the bill as introduced, but probably makes sense as well, is to give the Legislative Council the ability to approve waivers in this division as well, should the department need activity on shorter notice when the legislature is not in session. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Jillian Carlson, Iowa Board of Regents. We're undecided on the bill. No major concerns.
J.D. Davis with the Iowa Association of Business and Industry. We're monitoring the bill. Had conversations with Mr. Conlon. One of the things that regulated industries always work to solve is a regulatory lag. And what we want to see is in Division 2 that some of the safeguards you're putting in there for the voice of the legislature does not also create a regulatory lag. I think that's something we've had conversations with and want to review his language that he has. Just want to make that comment as you're working to advance this. Thank you.
I'm Pam Maggie-Taylor, representing the Iowa chapter of the Sierra Club. We are opposed to this bill. There already is a pretty detailed process for administrative rules that's done through the Administrative Rules Review Committee. And we believe this is micromanaging the process of making rules. And the other issue we have is that it diminishes the protections to the public that happens today through the administrative rules process. So we urge you to oppose this. Thank you.
Hi, Colleen Lindgren with the Pacific Legal Foundation. We support this bill. We believe that it helps return Iowa's rulemaking process to the original vision of checks and balances through constitutional separation of powers as reflected in both the U.S. and Iowa constitutions. And as mentioned previously by others, this is a good way for constituents and taxpayers in Iowa to be represented in the rulemaking process, which has the effect of law in their lives. And so we believe that the legislature, the elected lawmakers, should be engaged, and that this is a good bill that also streamlines the process and creates more clarity in rulemaking generally, and sets a meaningful threshold for major rules and legislative involvement. Thank you.
My name is Heather Ryan. I'm with the organization Bitches Get Stuff Done. We are registered against this bill because even though nobody else has addressed the gigantic elephant in the middle of the room, this will regulate the ability of the governor to have as much power as they currently do, just as the Republican governor is leaving office, and clearly the front runner is a Democrat. I do believe that this is a partisan bill, and I do believe that it will actually hamstring American citizens.
Nobody else? Nobody online? I'm gonna ask one last time for people online. Okay, Senator Winkler, any questions for the crowd, closing comments?
Sure, I have a lot of questions, but I want to mention that when I look at this code language in regard to the administrative rules, it 17A, .2, identifies that it needs to be streamlined, and it needs to be the same for every agency. This is a significant change in, the amount that might be spent or appropriated versus, the sitting process. I also serve on the Administrative Rules Review Committee. We just identified, uniform rules. One of the things that has been a frustration for many of us on the administrative rules when you talk about transparency is the fact that Executive Order 10 that the governor initiated does not give us a side-by-side comparison, nor does it give the public a side-by-side comparison of what it was that they were doing in their department and what they are projecting. It is a situation where I think that currently the public has been left out, but I will also add that this is going to add additional time. And I had asked some questions of LSA Jack Ewing, and he is here. He gave two hypotheticals, and if you would like to get, I can read them, or you can share the hypotheticals in regard to how this would work after a bill has been passed and signed by the governor.
So you're asking, excuse me, Jack Ewing, Legislative Services Agency. Is this about the expenditure language or?
Yes, the expenditure language.
So, one of the criteria for what is a major rule, which is what Division 1 of the bill cares about, our major rules, is expenditures to affected persons of over $200,000 a year or $1 million over 5 years. But then in the bill, there is an exclusion for express appropriations of the General Assembly. Meaning, if the General Assembly appropriates $5 million for a program, rules come out costing $5 million, that's sort of accounted for. So, if that's the only expenditure, then sort of the net expenditure would be zero, because the only expenditure is what the General Assembly already appropriated. Now, if the expenditure is in excess of what the General Assembly appropriated for any given thing, and that excess is above the $200,000 a year threshold, then that would trigger it being a major rule. So the hypothetical I indicated to you, Senator, was, if we had rules costing, $2,100,000, but there had been $2 million appropriated for that function, whatever it is. Then you would deduct that $2 million off the $2,100,000, end up with a cost and expenditure of $100,000, which would be under the threshold for a major rule, and wouldn't be subject to all the major rule stuff in the bill. I realize that's a lot of color, but that's what I.
Well, and then I asked additional questions about the timing, and there is a 35-day lag in, once the process starts before, I'm reading here, but the agency is generally prohibited from adopting a notice that is a major rule until 35 days after the LSA's analysis is published in the bulletin. It would cause a lag in rules being processed. It would be a lag in departments implementing, because if I understand correctly, and Jack, please correct me if I'm wrong, they cannot implement or work on that particular appropriation until the rules are adopted. Is that correct?
I mean, they couldn't, the scenario as I understand it, they can't adopt rules that are noticed, that are a major rule, until the LSA's work is done on that analysis. That's what the bill says. Now, what that lag would look like, even if there is a lag, I can't say for sure. Just can't project how long it would take to analyze
so I also asked how this would affect fiscal notes and if this particular process would have any impact on a fiscal note, and basically it could or it couldn't was kind of the information, only because of just a determination, just a decision-making piece. But the other thing that I would say with this is that to the point of business and industry, this would delay. And it would not make it more efficient or effective, in my opinion. I think that it would be interesting to be able to access all of that background information as they evaluate the impact on business and industry. I know that's being done currently behind the scenes, but I think that that would be interesting to be able to see that, which would also be additional transparency. This bill lacks that. And then I have a question in regard to why did you select just certain areas to reduce in their terms of office?
Senator Buslow.
Yeah. I think that Senator Winkler brings up an interesting point in Executive Order 10 and her desire for a side-by-side for rules that are being re-ratified and the changes that may or may not be being made, and oftentimes relying on the very folks who are regulated to make sure that there's a check in that process. To me, that only underscores the need for greater legislative oversight on rules. It doesn't undercut the need for this bill, it strengthens the case for this bill. I do have some concerns with the bill. I think that we need to ensure that it works within our legislative and administrative rules review process, introducing the legislative council rather than the administrative rules review committee to ratify those rules. I think we could have ARC play that ratification role because they meet regularly and have knowledge and experience in dealing with the rules process. Giving greater, the other thing I think that this bill does that is important is it gives additional members of the legislature a greater seat at the table in a rules process with rules that have the effect of law, have the effect of everyone has to follow them, and if not, you are violating the law. And so what this does is say, not for every rule, but for major rules, and defining that as high, very costly as one of those pieces, or something that is going to have significant adverse effects on the ability to employ, invest, compete, or innovate, that it says those are important. They have huge impact on Iowans on a daily basis, and giving the legislature more broadly a seat at the table is only putting more sunshine into a process that is vital because it does have the rule of law. And giving folks, someone who's impacted by a rule, more ability to challenge that rule in a district court level with a non-biased judicial branch, a judge reviewing it, I think is important. Like I said, I think there are parts of this rule that we could take a look at to make sure they conform to the rules process that we've established in Iowa, and that ARC plays a role. But overall, looking at and having more legislators, greater legislative oversight into a process that right now is pretty limited in terms of what the Administrative Rule Review Committee can do, and that was even expanded over a decade ago. I guess I'm someone who says that the executive branch, the balance to that, the check and balance of our system is only reinforced, of our constitutional system, is only reinforced by what this bill is driving at, which is to say that elected officials who face election more often than the governor should have a bigger say in rules that become law, and that there's a check on those for somebody who's aggrieved in those parties to go to the district court. That makes sense to me. I think we need to continue to work on the details of the bill, but I'll be signing off today and look forward to continuing conversations about the administrative rules review process. Thank you.
I think,
You didn't
I mean-
answer my question about the terms.
I will give you an answer as soon as I figure, I will go back and look at the terms as to why we did that.
Okay.
I will say this, it's a very interesting thing, and my interpretation on this is coming more from not this building, because I've never been on the rules, but from the private sector before I got here. I just attended a meeting right before this on what we call SUDOS. It's a general rule that gets put out for developers and road builders to set standards. I asked them, last time they changed their rule from this rule to this rule, I wanted a copy of their cost and benefit analysis. They didn't have one. They just changed the rules. They didn't say why, what it cost, what it did for anybody, nothing. This bill, in my mind, is saying we gotta start looking at what it costs the taxpayers to do this with cost benefit analysis, making sure that we have that, making sure that this rule that has large effect on the public and the general public does get slowed down. I think if you're gonna cost the public a lot of money, it should get slowed down. I realize that the Rules Committee works on deadlines. I realize that this bill isn't perfect yet. We need to look at some different areas, and we'll have some questions as it comes up. And when we go through that, we conformed with the House, so that's why they pretty much ran most of this language, as I let them do that as I was working on the local government reins. They were working on the state government reins. We need to make sure that the rules process has more people involved. I, as a legislator, have found frustrating at times when people are coming at you when you're out of session. These two fine senators are on Rules Committee so they can change and modify things, but getting a lot of things pushed back to us as, hey, this rule's coming through, this rule's coming through. Well, I can't do much about that besides talk to the people that are on the Rules Committee about it. I believe the larger legislature, when it's a major rule, should have way more effect on it, because I think the voters and the citizens believe that we do. And I believe this bill is getting closer to getting us that. Now, there will be changes. This is not a perfect bill. You know, the IPERS one was the first one we caught. ARC, and in that process, maybe another one. But it's a long session, but a short week for funnel here. I'm willing to work with all people to try to make this better and more palatable to them. So I will be signing off today on Senate File 2314, and Senate File 2314 will be adjourned.